Welcome back to Real Leverage, guys. Today we're joined by Wade Paterson. He is a director at Remax Canada, a speaking coach, and the host of 3 separate podcasts. Wade has mastered the art of identity stacking by building a massive media presence without ever leaving his corporate role. And today we're diving into his systems for managing high-level output, the mental models behind elite communication, and the operating procedures he uses to win in multiple lanes at once. Wade, thank you for coming on today.
Tyler, Colton, thank you guys for inviting me. I'm stoked to do this. And by the way, if you're listening to this episode, if you're watching it, do these guys a favor and subscribe right now, because there's some crazy stat that something like 90% of podcasters don't get past the 3rd episode. And these guys, I think, are on like episode 25 or something like that by the time this one comes up. This is 25. There you go. Yeah. So subscribe to these guys. They're doing great work and they're in it for the long run.
Thank you for saying that, Wade. That's definitely something we should incorporate into our intro a little bit more. I know Diver's CEO pretty much always says subscribe at the beginning of every episode. So thanks again for saying that, and thanks for coming on. Let's get into it. So you've managed to scale a high-level corporate career while simultaneously building 3 separate media brands in totally different niches. If you had to point to one specific mental model or operating principle that allows you to win at all of these lanes at once without burning out, what would that be?
I get energized and fueled by the side hustle or the other media ventures that I've had. My background's journalism, and what I've always loved doing is just the idea of creating. So that started with writing. When I was in high school, I tapped into this love for writing. That led me to journalism. And then from there, when I got the job with Remax, I started to have opportunities to speak. And what I realized is I got that same rush, that same excitement from building a great presentation that I do from writing something that's really cool. So I always had, when I moved over to this more corporate role at Remax, I still had that journalism itch, and I wanted to do things that were a good creative outlet. And so through YouTubing about public speaking, the crypto one, so my friend and I, we launched a podcast called Show Me the Crypto. That was just because my wife would literally set a timer on her phone, like 30 seconds. If I was talking to her about crypto, she'd be like, you have 30 seconds, go. Because she's just not interested in that. And so that whole venture was just so I had a buddy who I could talk to with or talk about crypto with. But that's really what it is. It's that creative side that allows me to tap into that or scratch that itch.
Interesting.
Appreciate that, Wade. And yeah, thank you for coming on. Obviously, you mentioned director at Remax, host of 3 podcasts, and a public speaker. For our audience, could you walk us through how you actually got into each endeavor? You kind of touched on it a little bit, but just in more detail.
Absolutely. So starting off with the journalism piece, I'll go way back. When I was in 11th grade, I had some friends who knew what they wanted to do. They had plans to go to college. They knew what they were going to take. I never had that. I didn't really know what I loved. There were certain subjects I liked better than others. But I had a grade 11 English teacher who came into the classroom one day, and he handed out just a blank piece of paper to every single person, every single student. And then he asked all of the students, or he gave the assignment, and it was really simple. He said, write whatever you want on this piece of paper, and then it's due tomorrow. And he left the classroom, and people were laughing and joking, thinking this was just the most ridiculous assignment. People were scheming like, I'm going to write one word. And he said, as long as we do the assignment, you get like 100%. So everyone was finding these little shortcuts around it. One girl who was like an interesting girl in our class, she just wrote the F word in like big letters and then handed that in. And she still got 100%. Everyone who did it got 100%. But for me, that tapped into something. And so I went home that night and I wrote a really great short story. And it was the best thing I had ever written up until that point in my life. And what I loved about this was this permission to be creative. Like someone had given me the parameters and the framework and given me the assignment. And then from there, it was my opportunity to take it and create whatever I wanted through it. I talked to a career counselor in my high school after this. He thought, well, you like writing, journalism might be the path for you. So I got into journalism. I was studying in Calgary at the time. And I quickly realized that while I have great respect for journalists and reporters and the role that they have, that's not what I'm passionate about. And so after college and then university, I did get a newspaper job for about 3 years here in Kelowna, but rushing out to a traffic accident to go and interview people and interview the police about what happened, that to me wasn't the same as writing a great feature story. So I still had the opportunity to do all of those things, but it wasn't totally exactly what I wanted to be doing. And then the other reality to this is that the newspaper industry was not exactly the most thriving industry. It was in decline. I would watch as my colleagues were getting let go. Our paper size was shrinking every single month, like less and less advertisers. And so I knew, being at the time in my early 20s, I have to do something for my career. Like, this is not going to be the long-term play. And Remax of Western Canada, they had their headquarters in Kelowna. And it used to be Remax of Western Canada, Remax Ontario Atlantic. That's now merged and it's all Remax Canada. But that was a real fortunate opportunity, because usually a corporate headquarters would be somewhere like Vancouver or Calgary or Edmonton. So to have that in Kelowna, I was able to apply for a job doing communications and social media. And then through that, I've evolved through the company. But to go really deep into this, when I started at Remax, what wasn't explained to me in the job interviews is that I would have to do a lot of public speaking. Like, every month we would have this orientation course where new real estate agents, at least new to Remax, would come to Kelowna. And my boss told me, Wade, I want you to do a half-hour presentation, teach these agents how to use social media. And for me, that was daunting. That was a lot of pressure because who am I? I've never been a real estate agent before, and I've never really given speeches before. And so I had all of this incredible anxiety before that first opportunity. And then it happened and I got through it. It kind of felt like an out-of-body experience. I don't know if you guys have ever had this speaking where it's like you're almost an autopilot and you get through it. And I had practiced a lot, so that served me well. And then I had a sigh of relief. But then 2 weeks later, I was now 2 weeks out from the next event, because this was a monthly event. And after 6 months, I did the math and I realized, wait, you're living half of your life with fear, anxiety about public speaking. There's no way to live your life. That led me into Toastmasters, and I've been a Toastmasters member ever since. So going on about 11 years, and I go every single Thursday morning. And about 5-6 years ago, right at the start of the pandemic, I realized there's an opportunity to create content about Toastmasters because this is an international program. I'll leave it there. Feel free to go wherever you want with the next one.
Yeah, and I guess just a quick follow-up would be, how do you fit all these endeavors into 24 hours? Because you're doing a lot of things.
It's tough. And my wife and I, we had our first child about a year ago. She just turned 1. And so at that point, you really have to start to decide what's most important. And it's tricky too. Whether or not balance is achievable is questionable. I think that my attitude has always been, some people get off their job, they finish at 5 p.m. or whatever time, and then they doom scroll and they watch Netflix. And that is their way. There's no shame in that. Like, that's their way of decompressing, of getting past the day. For me, I get antsy if I'm doing that. Like, if I'm sitting watching a show, I've tried to get better at like actually just relaxing and watching something. Like, usually I'm good for like one show, but then I have this, and I think it ties back to that desire to be creative and to be creating things. I truly feel antsy if I'm not being somewhat productive. And so it just worked for myself. It's kind of the Dan Martell method of, you know, you've got your 9 to 5, but what are you doing 5 to 9? So whether that's before work or after work. And so what I like to do is get up a little bit early, start my morning right. There's a really great speaker I saw once named Hal Elrod. He wrote a book called The Miracle Morning, and this focuses on about 6 things you can do every morning. And it's been documented. A lot of successful people in life focus on these 6 activities. There are things like exercising, visualization, writing or journaling, reading, affirmations. I can't remember what the sixth is, but there's these different things that you can focus on. So I always try to start my day getting the workout in, having some gratitude time. What am I thankful for? What am I trying to achieve? And I find if I can set my morning that way before I jump into the Remax work, I'm in a really good spot. And then later on after work, I have that natural energy to be working on those other creative endeavors. And so it energizes me. So it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel draining, if that makes sense.
Interesting. I've got about 7 follow-up questions. Very interesting stuff. So I'm going to go through a couple of them. I want to go back to continue to sort of set the scene here. You mentioned you analyzed your schedule and you said, I'm going to live the next, the rest of my life half the time in fear of public speaking and being nervous all the time. And I joke because I'm consistently nervous at my job now, new career, new sales, and I just changed positions again. So now I'm heading up a department of sales, taking all those calls, and it's nerve-wracking all the time, but you just got to face it. But I'm curious with you specifically, you chose to go into Toastmasters and learn and get over that fear, which you clearly have. Why didn't you just quit and go back to journalism or something, but you chose to, take that head on? Why didn't you just quit and go to the comfortable thing?
Discomfort's where we grow. We never grow when we're in comfortable areas. It's so important for us to constantly be pushing ourselves. And I've sort of tracked this of when now I've been with the company for 12 years. I've been with Remax Canada 12 years. And when I go through times of maybe it's a couple weeks where I'm just going through the flow and I'm not really doing anything above and beyond, and it's kind of just easy and I'm not doing a lot of creative endeavors, usually mentally that's when I feel the worst, because it's just I'm stagnant, I'm not growing. And also there wasn't a huge desirable thing to go back to, because I also had seen a lot of people I graduated journalism school with who were struggling. I'd say maybe 20% of people landed jobs because the newspaper industry was struggling. There were some other companies, one in Kelowna here is called Castanet, so they do a really good job with online journalism. But even in terms of the pay scale and what I was hoping to achieve, eventually wanted to become a homeowner, all of those sorts of things, it made no sense. And so for me to just quit, it's not something that would be in my DNA. My dad, he always had this quote that attitude is absolutely everything. It's not the most important thing, it's everything. And he talked about the fact that all day he would hire somebody who didn't have the skill set but had a great attitude versus somebody who was a rock star but just shitty attitude. He wasn't interested in that. And so I think that was just ingrained in me.
And I'm curious, okay, you kind of touched on it at the end. That was going to be my follow-up question. Have you always sort of had that mindset, and what influenced it? But it sounds like your dad influenced that mindset in you to always kind of be, positive, but also uncomfortable and kind of continually want to grow. Is that right?
Totally. And another thing he'd talk about, and this is common knowledge, this isn't from the source of my dad, but I'm sure something he picked up along the way, is tackling the hardest things first, right? Getting those out of the way in the morning. So I'm thinking about you. Congrats, by the way, Tyler, on the new position, the new role.
Thank you.
And so those tough things, whether it's sales calls or we all have them. I have a list today. I'm still old school. I got my notepad, but I've got the things that I'm going to tackle today. And my goal is, after this podcast, this is a fun thing for me, but after the podcast, I want to get those tough calls out of the way and done, because now the rest of the day is no problem. But also, it so often happens that those difficult things you built up in your mind end up not being nearly as bad as you think it's going to be. So my dad's attitude from the business side, and then I would combine, if I had to give credit to the person I've become, to my mom, she really instilled in me patience. She would take me to the Lethbridge shopping mall, Lethbridge, Alberta. I grew up in Taber, Alberta. Yeah. She'd take me to the Lethbridge mall, and I would we'd go shopping for a few things for myself. And then for her, and I have to wait outside, she would do the change rooms and everything like that. And then I'd just be so bored. And my mom's like, I'm training you for your future wife. She's going to thank me for doing this. But she really did like ingrained this patience in me. And she's also the best listener in the world. And I think this is such an important thing. You guys are great examples of this, of like being able to actually listen in a conversation. This is something that takes many people, sometimes they never get there, but it takes them a lot of their life to realize it's not just about what you want to say. When we're in a conversation, we're constantly thinking, what's the next thing I'm going to say? But the people who have the ability to truly listen to that other person and then ask questions, I think that's the biggest unlock. I really think that's the biggest unlock in terms of success in building relationships.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I agree. I mean, most people are focused on speaking instead of listening. That's why this podcast has been such a good teachable moments for Tyler and I. But Wade, you mentioned that you always need that creative outlet and that when you're not creative, you feel stagnant. Where do you think your creativity comes from?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I don't know for sure. I think that quite possibly I'd lean more to my mom on that side. She's beyond being an incredible mom. She's always been interested. She's very artistic, and I don't have that. But like in a way, I would actually say things like public speaking, writing even, they are an art form, just a very different art form. And my mom's always been a creator, but like very in the traditional forms of art. She does pottery, she does watercolors. It's like anything she does that's artistic is brilliant and amazing. And I try to draw something and it's so cringy. Like I'm the worst at Pictionary. Nobody can guess. It's embarrassing. It causes me anxiety. But I think that there's something there that it probably stems from. And it's just a cool feeling. Like, I don't know if you guys felt this or not, but I remember when I first learned how to podcast, like how to start running an episode, how to deploy it, and then like going into Spotify or Apple Podcasts and seeing like my cover art, an episode that I hosted, it was just the coolest feeling. And I don't know where that comes from, but I just know it's been there. And the first place I would track me realizing it was that grade 11 assignment.
Yeah, interesting. I'm curious about, your parents. You've mentioned them a couple times now. You accredit a lot of your sort of like lessons that have grown you to the person you have today from your parents. But I'm curious, beyond your parents, do you have any mentors right now that help you to continue to grow? And specifically on that point, if somebody doesn't have fantastic parents that have influenced them into becoming a great person, what would you tell them to sort of take those first steps, go out and find those mentors to continue to grow like that?
There's two people within Remax that really made an impact on my career within the company. The first was my previous boss, Roy Anderson. He's retired now. But Roy, so I started doing social media and communications, and then about 4 years into that, and this was the second mentor, a colleague of mine who was also my boss later on. His name's Kingsley Ma. So Kingsley and I were at a conference in Vegas, and we were coming back from some event, walking back to the hotel, and he said, hey, like, dude, why don't you join, at the time it was called member services or regional development. Basically, it's working directly with broker owners. He's like, why don't you like come into that role? You'd be really good at it, and it pays a lot better, and yeah, I think like we could use you in that role. And I thought it was hilarious. Like I told Kingsley, I don't have my real estate license. I don't even like real estate that much. I know that sounds really crazy, but like that, I'm not passionate about that. I found a passion within this job, and that passion is helping these broker owners, these agents who are dealing with the biggest financial decision of many people's lives, and they are passionate about that. I care about those people, and so I know if I can do a good job in my role, I can serve them well. And so I've had to find a way to like instill a different passion within this job. But this was way before that, and I could not imagine like how would I eventually be in this sort of director role? That doesn't make any sense. But he kept encouraging me, and he said he came from Century 21, and he told me when he was researching for the job, he thought I was like the boss. And I thought this was hilarious. And I asked him why. And it's because I was putting out a lot of content. So I was doing things like creating a podcast for our office. I was the host. I was interviewing everyone. And he's like, you're already like this digital face of Remax of Western Canada. It seems like a natural progression. He convinced me. So I applied for the job. And then, so Roy Anderson ended up being my boss. He was the one who I had to like, it was a pretty casual interview with Roy. But what he said is, because I had a lot of imposter syndrome at the time, and I thought, how on earth am I going to do this role? And Roy put it really well, and this meant a lot to me, something that stuck with me. He said, Wade, it's like a potluck. If everyone brings the exact same thing, it's a pretty lousy potluck. Roy himself had been an agent. He'd been an owner of a Remax office. I had another colleague, Derek Thorvaldson, who was the manager of an office in Winnipeg. Kingsley came from the corporate background. He had 13 years of experience with Century 21, but none of them knew marketing and communications like I knew that. And so he really built me up and made me feel like I was an asset to this team and that we could lean on each other. To answer the second part of your question, how can somebody find this type of person? By asking, first off, identify who it is that you admire. And that can be beyond just they're successful in the job title. They might be somebody who has really good attitude. They might have skills that you want to attain. And ask them out for a coffee. Get to know them. Take them for lunch. People are very quick, and you're probably learning this with the whole podcasting. When you reach out to somebody, it's a very flattering situation. I host a lot more than I'm a guest on podcasts. And so when I get asked to be on a podcast, it's something that's kind of special. And people love to share, especially when they've gotten to a point in their career where they feel like they can give back and educate. And then the really far step is what you guys are doing. That's what I would suggest. Launch a podcast, start an interview series, because there's so many ways, like you guys said, about documenting this, but you instantly build a deeper connection. We have never met before other than a couple emails and conversations, but yet I feel like after this conversation, we could probably be at the same event and we'd chat for hours kind of thing. Yeah. Like you build an instant connection with somebody. Those are my thoughts.
I love that, Wade. And you mentioned something that Tyler and I relate to a lot, which is you were posting content, which led to an opportunity to become the director of Remax because people already thought you were the boss. Tyler specifically has been posting content, which has led to opportunities. I'm posting content, which I'm hoping to lead to more opportunities. Comes back to a saying we say, be seen, be read, be heard. That's something Tyler and I say all the time. For our audience, someone who's wanting to post content or get out there to lead to other opportunities, what advice would you give to them?
You need to start doing it. And I start to think of like, what are going to be the biggest differentiators? You guys have had some guests on who talk about AI and the future of AI. I'm not going to pretend that I know anywhere near the experts that you've had on. But what I do know is that AI is already ubiquitous. It is going to dramatically disrupt every industry, every job, and probably a lot quicker than people imagine. Like it's going to move really quick. And the whole idea behind this is that tech is evolving at an exponential rate, and our brains have a really tough time understanding exponential growth. So going back to that, I actually think that this skill of honing public speaking, communication, being able to be like just a really great human communicator is going to be a huge differentiator. I also think that those who have taken the time to put out more content, I don't know exactly how this happens, but even watching clips from like Gary Vaynerchuk and different people, they talk about how the people who have already built this are going to win in the AI era for already having their content out and AI starting to learn off of the existing content that's out there. One quick example of this, by the way, is that I've just started like playing around with Claude Code, and like in a night, I took every YouTube video I'd done, long form YouTube video, it was almost 200 of them, and I was able to turn them all into blog posts, and it's like a living website with like everything is transcribed perfectly. I checked like 20 of them, they're flawless, and that was like I'm not a techie guy, and I was able to build that in a couple of hours, and so it's just going to be so dramatic. I think big challenge I would have to people is post and like, don't build up in your head, okay, I've got to do this perfect video. It's got to be polished. It's going to be this one-time thing. It's going to be amazing. They romanticize this idea of this perfect piece of content. And the reality is it's probably not going to do great. Like, you'll post it. Maybe some people will be like, oh, cool, this is different content. But like, it's not going to go viral. It's not going to get a million. You have to just consistently be putting it out and then recognize patterns or trends. When you start to see a bit of a spike in those views, okay, that is the algorithm telling you something. Double down on that type of content, recreate it, maybe even repost it in a different way.
You're preaching to the choir, Wade. Because for me, I've been just taking videos, trying to do it in one take and post it just to become a more confident communicator and speaker.
Love that.
And to your point, yeah, what's happening with AI is scary. And I'm a big believer communication is going to be the most important skill in the world, especially now with AI. People are going to crave human connection. They're already craving human connection. For someone who wants to improve their communication right now, what would you say to them to get started?
It depends what form. So if we're talking about social media content, just start taking action, start doing it. Give yourself a challenge. I love this. I was looking up on TikTok. People created this public speaking. I'm going to post a video every single day, and I'm going to challenge myself to talk from 1 to 2 minutes. And every example I came across, the people who, like, I would watch their day 1 and then their day 95, 96, 97, and it was such a dramatic improvement. The first day, it was super cringy to watch, but like incredibly brave of these people. They'd be like, I hate this. Like, I'm really nervous. I don't know what to say. And then by day 100, they're like, hey guys, this is day 100 of my challenge. I can't believe I made it here. Man, what a great week this has been. And like, you can feel the energy that they have. So if it's something like that, just give yourself your own challenge. Heck, use one of these AI tools to give a challenge for you and actually start doing it. Make it a priority. Right now this year, I've never posted daily on social media. That's my challenge this year. I have to post a daily clip. And I even think I am dramatically underposting, even with 1 clip per day. Like, I think I need to be doing a lot more, but we talked about bandwidth and balance earlier. You can only do so much sometimes. In terms of public speaking, join Toastmasters. Like, it is probably the single best way to improve those public speaking communication skills. It is both a gym and a playground. And what I mean by that is, I talk to some people and they say, oh, cool, you're a member of Toastmasters? I used to do Toastmasters like 10 years ago. It was great. And in my mind, that's the same thing as saying, oh, you work out? Yeah, I used to work out 10 years ago. It was awesome. Like, I went to a gym for 6 months. It was fantastic. Well, we know that if you don't continue to go to the gym, you're going to lose fitness, cardio. You're going to have all of those issues, muscle mass. You have to keep doing it. And I think the same for public speaking. I notice when I don't go to a Toastmasters meeting for, let's say, 2 months, I get incredibly rusty and I notice that those skills go away. And then on the flip side, it's a playground. You have this group of people who is there to support you. It is a friendly environment, and you can challenge yourself. You can be creative. You can test a wedding speech. You can test a business presentation. It's just this great opportunity, and it's really hard to simulate a public speaking live audience. I think Toastmasters is the best way to do that.
That's amazing. I've got 2 follow-up questions to that. And to your point about just starting people on day 1 versus day 100, so true. Like, I think we were talking about before this call, me and Colton started this podcast back in August of 2025. That's simultaneously when we both started posting on short form social media. I've been relatively consistent with about a month break in January. And it's like painful to watch my August and September videos. I actually can't watch it. It's so bad. And now it feels like it's night and day. I feel totally comfortable on camera. I feel like I could interview, the Prime Minister right now. And same with my social media. It's massive. The bounds and leaps the content has made, but both from the content, but the confidence standpoint as well. Me and Colton are way more confident talking to people, talking to strangers, networking. We have to do a lot of networking in our industry. So I appreciate you kind of shedding light on that, and as well, actual steps that people can take to improve their speaking, both with Toastmasters and content. But I'm curious for my first question, obviously you talked about speaking and, doing content and communication being super important moving forward in this evolving world with AI. How are you able to identify that opportunity, and why do you think that a lot of people haven't, or is it just fear related?
First thing, everyone's day one is cringy. Like, I mean, you can go back and you can watch Mr. Beast, right? Like in those videos, of course he was incredibly young at the time, but like he's in just like a room, like his high school room or whatever. And like, there's no background, there's nothing to it. Anyone who has become any sort of notable host or interviewer has those moments, and everyone has to start at chapter 1. That is just part of the process. You guys are brave enough to be documenting this, and how cool is that? Like 10 years from now, I really believe you guys are probably, it might not be this exact form, but you're probably going to continue to do some sort of online content, and you'll have these clips that you can like, and it'll be fun to look back on it. Or maybe you're giving a presentation and you're teaching people how to build an online profile, and you can show them the journey that you took, and that's going to be inspirational for other people. I will answer your question, but I want to ask you guys, did you find like you said the confidence has grown quite a bit, which is fantastic. Do you enjoy it as well? Like, I would imagine when you started this, if it's not something you're comfortable with, it was maybe painful to do these episodes. Like, what's the enjoyment factor for each of you? Tyler, I'll ask you first.
Yeah, thank you for throwing that to me. I'm ready to jump on that. And thank you for asking. It's a fantastic question. First of all, absolutely love it. I've been fairly consistent with my content. I do finance content. You probably snooped my page for 5 seconds, so you might have seen it. And that's what I do on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts. And obviously the podcast, it's a different approach because both of those different types of things are my passion. But to the podcast specifically, from an enjoyment factor, like me and Colton did about 3.5 months of consistency. We took a break. We were kind of figuring out what direction we want to take the show. We got a bit busy too. Like, the company we work for hosts a huge conference in Vancouver. Over 10,000 people come every year. Super busy. So we were very busy in December and January. It's at the end of January every year. And so we took a break from the podcast, and we took a business trip to Toronto for our jobs at the very beginning of March. And we spent the whole time basically talking about the podcast and how it just energizes us. And it's so fun. And we've been coming back like full swing. We've kind of revamped the angle of the show. We've got our next 6 guests lined up for all of April. We're going to be 2 episodes a week. We're eyeing up a new series of a duo episode to do 3 episodes a week. So to that point, I guess I didn't know originally how much I was going to enjoy content, but it like literally fuels my life to do the content. It's such a habit now, the short form content. It forces me to stay in the loop with world events and finance, and as an investor and a passion for investing, it's like, it forces me to do that in the most positive way. It's built my confidence up in all areas of my life, and it just energizes me to continue to learn from different people on the podcast.
That's so cool. Colton, what about for you?
Yeah, I love this kind of little back and forth. Yeah, it's been everything. When I was younger, I was in speech therapy. I wasn't a very confident speaker. I was scared. I never asked questions because I was scared I was going to stutter or say something wrong. So I was very quiet as a kid and didn't have a lot of confidence. So to be able to be doing the podcast and content to grow my confidence, become a better speaker, and now I'll talk to cashiers or anyone. And honestly, that's the most important thing. It's greater than money to me that I can have a conversation with anyone and not be scared. So to answer your question, the podcast, the content is everything. And I'm just so happy to keep growing and learning.
I'm so pumped for you guys. And this goes back to, I think Colton asked the question earlier of like, how do you find the time to do all these things? I feel the exact same. Like, I'm pumped. All these questions come to mind for me that after we hit end the recording, I'm sure we'll talk about afterward. Yeah. But like, I love seeing that energy that you have, and there will be times that it can, running a podcast, there's highs and lows sometimes. Sometimes you have a big guest, they cancel, and then you can never get that guest back, and it's like, you have these deflating moments. But just like bottle up that feeling and keep going with that. And you guys are like the pace you're on right now of like launching not even a year ago and already being 25 plus episodes, like having 6 guests in the hopper. Like, this is fantastic. So I'm really stoked for you guys. That's awesome to hear. And by the way, Colton, it's a quick side story. There's a gentleman named Mohammed Katani, and he has this story where, as a child, I'll give you the very shortened version, he had a really bad speech impediment, the stutter, and he grew up in Saudi Arabia. And one of his classes, the teacher, like most teachers knew that he was very self-conscious about this, so they just leave him and they wouldn't bother him because he would never speak up in class. But he had a teacher that came up who was a particularly mean teacher, handed him the book, like the textbook they were reading from, and asked him to stand up and read. And Muhammad was like looking pleadingly at this teacher, please don't make me do this. And he's like, do it right now. And so anyways, he stood up, he stuttered like every single word. It was horrible. This teacher, who's a horrible human being, slapped him in front of the class. Like, it was this absolute shocking thing. And so as you can imagine, this happened to Muhammad in, I think it was junior high. The next years in his class, he didn't talk to anyone. Like, he was just mortified by the situation. He never planned to speak to anybody. And then it was in high school, he was sitting beside another classmate, and this classmate started to get to know him and was like a really genuinely good person, and was so confused, like, why aren't you talking? And eventually found out Muhammad dealt with this stutter, and he said, man, you got to face your fear head on. That's the only way we get past these things. And Muhammad was like, no, absolutely not. Like, rightfully so. He had this horrifying situation. So the friend kept pushing him, and he challenged him to read the morning announcements at the school, which usually the principal would do, but students could volunteer to do it if they wanted to. So he finally talked Muhammad into doing this. Muhammad went into the principal's office. He read it. As you can imagine, went not well. He stuttered almost every word. He was so nervous. People were laughing. So Muhammad came back and he told his friend, and he's like, are you happy? Like, this is what happened. And he's like, it's not easy. You have to keep doing it. You need to go back tomorrow. He kept pushing him. He went back and back and back. And for the first couple of weeks, it was horrible every time. And then all of a sudden, something started to happen where the fellow classmates were not laughing so much. It just, like, they knew Muhammad was doing this every day. His stutters got less and less and less. He started to gain confidence. Muhammad, I will fast forward this story, went on to win the 2015 Toastmasters International Speech Contest. He became the world champion of public speaking. And so to go from this state of, like, horrible, like this teacher having that horrible thing, to, like, winning at the highest level in terms of public speaking, it just goes to show, and even with your story, Colton, that's incredible how, like, you struggled with that, but you're facing it head on. So anyways, thought I'd share that. Tyler, I didn't forget about your question that you asked before. So why don't people face this, right? Like, even if we think about the story I just told with Muhammad, it's that public speaking is the number one most common personal fear in the world. And so I think fear is a major thing. People, and they might not want to admit it. Like, admitting that they're not a confident public speaker, that maybe questions their leadership skills. There's just an assumed you should be able to do this. But I think it's important that we acknowledge how tough of a thing it is, especially live presenting in front of a live audience. And I think the other factor to it is that we've romanticized the idea of being able to wing it. So the idea that somebody can just get up there and rip off like a perfect speech and get a standing ovation. And I think the reality is 99% of speakers can't do that. They need to practice. They need to put in the time. They need to work on the craft. There's maybe those unicorn 1% of people who just don't get nervous, and that's their personality. But I think that's the vast minority of people.
Yeah, interesting. What a great story. Thank you for sharing that. I'm curious about a couple things on that. And to that point, which Colton shared, obviously you shared that story as well. And I forgot to add for context on my backstory. I was the kid in high school who sat with his hoodie up over his head and face went beet red when the teacher asked me a simple question that I knew the answer to. Even if I could answer it with my eyes closed upside down, being drowned in a bathtub, face was beet red, hoodie over the head, all of high school. Same thing. I actually did 1 year of university before dropping out. I sat in the backup class with my hoodie up and didn't go to class a lot of the time. So it's wild to see the development from that standpoint. I've always been a very shy person. And so I dealt with a lot of fear about building a personal brand, doing social media, doing podcasting. You know, I identified back in like 2021 that I should be doing a personal brand because I knew the benefits of doing that. And I've seen those like compound tenfold in the last 8 months. So much opportunity has come from it, both from the podcast and my personal brand, but fear held me back. So I'm curious your perspective on fear, because you've made a lot of jumps in your career as well, from journalism to Remax, and you were afraid. And I'm sure there's a bit of fear maybe with social media and stuff like that. How have you approached fear in your life?
You've got to approach it head on. And so putting in the reps, let's take public speaking, because that was probably the biggest thing that was like genuinely impacting my day-to-day life, with the fear and the anxiety about it, which, by the way, it doesn't go away. Like, not so much, but to a certain level, I was a bit nervous before we hit the record button this morning. Yeah. And I've been like more on the hosting side, but I've done a lot of podcast episodes over the years. I know I have a certain level of confidence that I know I will deliver to a certain level. However, the fear still is there and it doesn't fully go away. My whole goal with starting to go to Toastmasters was to reduce the anxiety I was feeling. And what happens is when you make something just a regular part of your schedule, I know for a fact, once per week, I will be getting in front of a room of people for a minimum of 2 minutes and speaking. And so when you do that and you start to stack that over weeks and over months and over years, all of a sudden it's still a little scary, but you've done it so many times and you're building those reps. So I think that is the way to approach anything. Experience, practice. Same thing goes for my Remax job. I had that imposter syndrome. And of course, there were cringy conversations. I had brokers asking me, Wade, what is my business worth? And I was like, I don't know. And I would stumble and fumble through those phone calls. Well, the good news was I could go and talk to my boss, Roy. We could have that conversation. I would learn it. So the next time I'd have that call, I'd still fumble through it, but I was a bit better than last time. And then the next time a bit better, to the point where now I can very confidently have those conversations, but it's just experience and reps. But you have to find it in yourself to be brave enough to start the process, because we all have to start somewhere. And you guys did that. Congrats, by the way, like overcoming those early fears and like this is the other thing about public speaking too, is that people label themselves. They just identify. They say, I'm not a speaker. I'm not that person. And it's untrue. You've built a habit of not speaking or getting nervous. You just need to replace that habit or tweak that habit or build a new habit. And I've seen so many examples of people who joined Toastmasters who could not get through a couple sentences. A year later, they're confidently delivering presentations without notes. Anyone can do it.
That's a fantastic point, Wade. And yeah, anyone can do it. It's just a mindset. You got to get out of that negative mindset. And you mentioned about practicing and getting feedback in communication. It seems like you think about communication as a skill and practicing. You've taken a systems approach to it. How did you kind of develop that framework, and how do you teach people nowadays?
When it comes to practicing any sort of speech, I'm like psychotic with it. I practice so often because for me, I want to know I did everything possible to prepare adequately. So if I'm giving a presentation to, let's say it's a Remax event and it's our annual conference. So it's not the 10,000 people conference you were talking about, but our Canadian conference, we usually get around 1,000 or just shy of that. And that's still a big room. That's a big stage, 900 people in the audience. I want to ensure that it's so dialed in my head that I'm not going to stumble through anything. So I'm practicing on a consistent basis. I think for most people, advice number one is to consider joining something like Toastmasters, where you can just get the familiarity of being in front of a group of people. And then in terms of practicing, set up like your own space or environment of what that looks like. I do a lot of visualizing. So like I'll practice in different parts of my house when I'm practicing for a presentation. I will like try to know what the venue is that I'm going to be speaking at. And then I will almost like do a visualization of like pretending like familiar faces I know are going to be in the audience. And it's weird. Like sometimes my wife walks in and she's like, what on earth are you doing? And I'm just talking in a separate room, but I'm just doing that process. And I think the other aspect to this has to do with, just in terms of when it comes to more like video content and that type of thing, it goes back to putting in the reps and just forcing yourself to do it. I hope that answered the question.
It sure did, yes.
I'm curious, and I'd like to speak a little bit more to that. You said that people label themselves, I'm predicting as bad speakers, unconfident people and stuff. So I'm curious what you've sort of learned about people labeling themselves like that, but you clearly, visualizing the space, the people, and you're visualizing yourself succeeding in that environment, delivering those speeches and stuff. What have you sort of learned about the power of visualizing success and labeling yourself as a person that is good at that, speaking, being confident stuff, whereas most people do the opposite?
There's so many documented examples about the power of visualization and like the actual psychology behind it. I've read a couple of books that touch on this. I just know that it works. I mean, like you've seen athletes who talked about like the fact, like I saw this moment, I visualized it. For me, this is a really like minor example, but when I was in junior high, I love playing volleyball. I still play volleyball to this day. And I wanted to make the varsity team, so our grade 12 team in grade 10, because you're eligible to play on that team once you were in 10th grade in Alberta. But most people didn't. Like some people would play it in 11, but most people not till they got to grade 12. But I wanted, and I would like visualize this because I just thought it would be the coolest thing. I'd get like massive points, social points in high school if I was like that grade 10er on the varsity team. And then it happened. Like obviously that had to do with working on the skills and everything, but like this is something I thought about often. And it doesn't always perfectly work that way. There's also been examples. I'll give you a recent one. One of my biggest goals this year was I wanted to be the 2026 Toastmasters International Champion. And I was so like, again, I was crazy about this. I practiced every day on this speech from last August. And so every night before I went to bed, I'd like go in my garage so I didn't wake my baby or my wife, and I would practice this speech. And I was so confident, and I won our club contest, and then I lost at the second round. And I was shocked. But then I had to realize it went really well. Like I don't think I could have delivered the speech any better, but it was a subjective opinion and I didn't win. And so sometimes it doesn't always come to fruition, but now the challenge, because I wanted to like pout and whine and all of those sorts of things and like, oh, I didn't achieve my goal, but you've got to change it. Like it's got to be, what's the next thing that you're focused on? You can't change that. That's out of your control. Okay, what do you focus on now? And then to take this one step further from the real tangible, which is like an important piece of advice for anyone who's giving an actual speech, there's something really powerful about when you get to that space, being able to visualize before you go and present. So if you have the chance, if you're presenting on a stage, go stand on that stage. Get familiar with what the stage feels like. Look out at those chairs. Sometimes there's bright lighting on the stage. Ask the AV team, can you turn on the light so I can get familiar with what this is going to look like? Can I do a mic test? Because those people who have the preparation and take that extra step, it's so much more powerful than simply sitting in the audience and then being called up to give a presentation. And you go from being an audience member to now you're facing this massive crowd of people. That's where a lot of people will get stage fright or imposter syndrome or whatever it is. And so the visualization should start in the practice phase, but then right before as well, you have the chance to speak to a room of people, also incorporate visualization.
That's fantastic advice. And I just have one point to add to that for our viewers before Colton jumps in. And I know we're sort of approaching our time here as well, but I don't know if you've read the book Psycho-Cybernetics or not, Wade.
No, I'll write it down right now.
Yeah, that's a fantastic book. I actually just got me and Colton's other buddy to pick it up. We're at the local chapters on the weekend, and he picked it up. But in that book specifically, it's similar to Think and Grow Rich, but it's a little bit different. I recommend that anybody reads it. To that point specifically, it uses an example of Ben Hogan, a golfer, and he used to sit in his room before a big tournament in the PGA, and he would sit there, close his eyes, and play the golf course with his eyes closed. He would literally be, okay, I'm on hole 1, the wind's doing this, the hole is shaped this way, I need to hit my drive this way, and then I'm this far out, and I need to hit my approach shot X amount of yards, and he would play the entire golf course in his mind repeatedly before stepping onto the golf course, which is absolutely insane, but it goes to show that the power of visualization and seeing it before it happens and getting comfortable is so powerful. And to take it a step further, in your example, you get to visualize it, but you also get to feel it before the real deal. It's just such a powerful example of what you can do to get comfortable, before the uncomfortable thing.
I love that. And yeah, there's so like the athlete that came to mind, it's a random one, Canadian athlete, Bianca Andreescu, the Canadian tennis. Well, I'm trying to think. I think she won the US Open. I could be wrong on that. One of the major tennis tournaments. But she just would talk about this visualization. So many great athletes talk about the fact that I haven't heard that golf story to that depth, but it makes perfect sense. And it's not surprising at all. There's real power to being able to visualize yourself doing something well.
Yeah. 100%.
And I agree. I need to visualize a little deeper, because I visualize every day about what the future is going to look like, but actually diving deep into what that means. Yeah. But which is a skill I need to practice. But we're wrapping up here, Wade, and we have this final question that we ask our guests, and I would love to hear what you have to say. And it's, what is one thing you want to leave with our audience before you go here? A piece of advice, a lesson?
Ask more questions in conversations than having others ask questions to you. So almost imagine it that someone's keeping score, and for every question you ask, you get a point. And I know that sounds a little bit silly, but the general theme, there's another quote, be interested, not interesting. Everyone wants to talk about themselves, and everyone's got these rich and complex lives. There's this powerful word, and it hit me like a year ago when I came across this. The word is called Sonder. Have you guys heard of this word before?
No.
So it's called a neologism in the sense that it was a word that was invented in 2012. So it's a new word, essentially. Hasn't been around that long. But the definition of Sonder is the realization that every passerby is living a life as vivid and complex as your own. So I want you guys to imagine, Colton, you're downtown Vancouver, you're walking to a coffee shop. On that walk, you're going to pass by hundreds of people on the street. You're not going to say a word to those people. You're just minding your own business. You're going to the coffee shop. Then you're going to order coffee, and maybe you head back home. In that short journey, all of those hundreds of people, they're sort of like extras in your life. You never said a word to them. They were minding their own business. You're minding your own business. Then you go and you maybe have a couple words with the barista. Maybe that's a recurring character. Then you talk to a family member. That's a supporting actor or actress, whatever that looks like. The idea of Sonder is realizing that every single one of those people, every extra who walked by you on that coffee shop walk, is living a life where they are the protagonist. They are the main character. And you are just an extra in their life. Like, you're just a random passerby. And I think when we have this understanding that everyone's lives are so complex and vivid, then all of a sudden it allows us to tap into curiosity, to get to learn. Like, I was so eager to learn before we hit record how you guys met each other, how you got to know. And it makes us want to ask questions. And this is also very well documented. When people are asked questions in a conversation, they like those conversations better because somebody's showing a genuine interest in them. That is the single biggest thing, I think. This goes beyond public speaking or social media content, just in one-on-one conversations. And you guys know this well. Ask more questions than you get asked.
That is fantastic advice to leave with our audience. That is probably like one of the biggest things me and Colton have been continually learning over the last year or so, building new networks and stuff. It's like we literally grill everybody we meet because we're so curious about them. We want to learn from them, right? It kind of ties into the point of the podcast. but that is the best advice. Thank you so much for sharing that with our audience, Wade, and thanks for jumping on the podcast today.
Thank you guys. Great job. And by the way, if you are listening or watching to this and you have not yet, I told you earlier to go and subscribe. If you have not yet done that, do these guys a favor. They're doing a great job with the pod. Subscribe to them. Check out future episodes. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Wade.
it.